Okay, now if you look at, this is by the Italian painter Caravaggio. It's called The Doubting of Thomas. And I don't know if you remember the story, but the story is that, he takes it from the New Testament. The story is that Jesus was crucified, died, and they say buried, but he was interred, obviously, in a like internment cave. And and then 3 days later, or some days later, anyway, the rumor goes around that he's been seen. And Thomas, one of the disciples, says, "I don't believe it." You know, a very modern reaction, right? So I gotta see this. You know, so you gotta be kidding, and so, as the story goes, Jesus appears to Thomas, and Thomas actually the lovely modern, sort of right out of medical school, sticks his finger in the wound, the slash in Jesus' side where the Roman soldier had taken a spear to see if the guy was dead yet, and cut open the side, and I don't know exactly what that proves. I guess if a fluid is coagulated, he's dead, right, or something. Does anyone know? Never mind. It's not important. Now, this is a Baroque moment. It could have been a Renaissance moment where, the spiritual and the physical come together and it all makes sense. But that's not what Caravaggio shows us. Caravaggio shows us Thomas sticking his finger in the side, and it just doesn't make sense. Right? That's Baroque. Look at his face, all these furrowed brows, right? And the expression is not, as the Bible later tells us, "Oh, now I believe." The expression here is, "Huh? You gotta be kidding. This is not making sense." Right? Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I'm not sure if the answer to that question is yes or no. Never mind, that was a dumb joke. So that's Baroque. And it's basically the question of physical versus the spiritual, right? The spiritual's question was, what Caravaggio is doing is he's pointing out, literally, in this painting, the problem, the modern perspective of the story, that the spiritual religious explanation doesn't line up with the physical explanation, or the laws of the physical world. What you're seeing here, and you see it on his face, kind of doesn't make sense. Now the Bible would say it doesn't matter. It's not a question of empirical proof, it's a question of faith. But that's not Caravaggio's answer. Now there's another thing, and this is just a technique, that Caravaggio made famous, and it's typically Baroque, and that's contrast in terms of light and dark. And just real quickly, where is the dark and where is the light? It's a stupid question, you can just answer, What, you see the darkness, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, the whole background, there's nothing in the background, it's just darkness, pitch black, right? And the light shines on actually sort of in strange places. The brightest part of the painting is here, on the shoulder of Jesus, which makes no sense. It's not the most important part. In fact, it's not important at all. There's a fair amount of light on the furrowed brow. That kind of makes some sense, right? What the heck is going on here, right? And there's some light here, but in the hand here. And this is typical Caravaggio. In the Renaissance, you think of Raphael, or you think of Leonardo da Vinci. The light always shone at the most important part of the painting, the face of the person who now believes or understands. The Virgin Mary looking at the baby Jesus saying, this is meaningful. You see that face. That's where the light focuses. What happens in the Baroque period? There's a great one calling the Calling of St. Matthew, where the brightest place in the painting is the wall above, the blank wall, in a totally meaningless, dirty wall. And everything that's going on in the middle is more dark. That's typically Baroque. This is where the light doesn't show you anything, really, because we don't know. It's all a question mark, right? Like this. So that technique is not only important for art, and this is going to sound weird, it's also important for music. And what we get in this first concerto grosso we're going to listen to is a musical version of this strong contrast between dark and light. And you'll hear what I mean in a moment. Let's go on to the next thing. Now I'm going to lay out, and a lot of musicologists would disagree with me here, but the difference between what I'm going to call early Baroque and late. So early Baroque is, we've talked about a lot of kinds of contradictions, spiritual, physical, and so forth. Also one of the contradictions is the relationship of the sexes, men and women. The relationship, there was a very erotic time, I've already said that, right? And you can see that here, this is sort of an erotic moment, but it's also a moment of antithesis between men and women. The story is this. Apollo, the god of reason, believe it or not, which also doesn't make sense here, falls in love, or actually more in lust, with a young woman named Daphne, and wants her and chases her actually, and she's not interested for whatever reason, and runs away. And so already you have kind of it's not exactly a harmony of the Renaissance. You've got an antithesis already. So the relationship of the sexes is both, as you see here, erotic, but also antithetical. She runs, but of course he's quicker than she is. And just as she's reaching the river, he catches up. And you can see his hand is already on her side, on her hip. And she calls out to her father, who happens to be a river god. This is an old Greek myth. And the river god, her father, comes to her aid to protect her, to save her from a relationship with Apollo, who is a beautiful young man and a god. You'd think, oh, yeah, what could you do better as a Wall Street trader? But no, that's not what this is about. And so he helps her by turning her into a tree. And you can already see here that her leg is starting to build bark. Her foot, her toes, you can't see it very well here, but her toes are already roots into the ground. Her hand, where is it? I don't know if you can see it here. Her hand is already sprouting leaves and twigs, and she's halfway into the other realm, which means that this antithesis of this relationship is so onerous to her that she would rather give up her spirit, her human nature, and become an unconscious, unprescient tree. Right? Strange story from ancient Greece, but typically Baroque. Right? Both because it's this strange combination of erotic attraction and unattraction, and antithesis, and repulsion, running away. Right? That not coming together, those opposite impulses of being attracted and being thrown away at the same time, that's typically Baroque. Does that make sense? So, a very Baroque moment here, and this is early style. I'm going to say it's early style because the antithesis is very strong and very bold. What's going to happen in late Baroque style is we're going to get used to these antitheses, and we're going to sort of start playing with them a little bit more. We're going to get a little bit more interested in them. We're going to play, and we're going to actually find them more fascinating. I'm not sure fascinating is the word. Let's go on. So, my first musical piece picks up these antitheses in music. I'm just going to play a little bit of it for you. You can probably keep it running. People can, of course, listen to it online, but I'm going to do something with it in a moment, too. Raise your hand when it starts. Have you listened to this already before coming to class? Raise your hand if you've heard it before. I'm guessing you have. stop for a moment. And I'll restart again. I'm gonna, bear with you, turn it off for a second. I'm gonna